Welcome to Still Evolving, where we explore the truth behind lasting performance and resilience. Rather than relying on perfection or superhuman ability, our conversation will highlight how real strength emerges through simple, intentional habits grounded in self-compassion, adaptability, and the ability to grow through life's inevitable setbacks. Today's guest is David Collins. David is the Chief Operating Officer of BNI Global, the world's largest business networking and referral organization. With more than 35 years of experience, he has built a career driving growth and operational excellence across global franchise systems. He is a recognized leader in the franchise industry, a certified franchise executive, and a frequent international keynote speaker. At the center of his work is the philosophy of giver's gain, a belief in the power of contribution, connection, and community to both drive performance and impact. Please welcome David to Still Evolving. Dave, welcome to Still Evolving. Grateful to have you here in this conversation today. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Happy to be here.
Why don't we start off with you having the opportunity to share with our audience a bit of your background? So reflecting on your journey, maybe where you came from, what you're working on now.
Yeah. So, when people ask me that, I really do try to start at the beginning because my journey isn't the traditional smooth line journey in that I was the first person in my entire family to graduate from high school. So there was zero expectation that I would go on to college and do any of that. And so right out of high school, I didn't, but I played a lot of ice hockey and I got recruited to go and play ice hockey in college. And that's how I ended up in college. So I did go to play hockey, not so much to go to class.
Yeah.
It took me a minute. I had a great time doing that. And actually on the 45th anniversary of the USA Miracle on Ice, which is coming up right now,
Right.
I had the opportunity to play in that rink 2 years after that happened in Lake Placid, which was really cool.
Wow.
And
That
so,
is cool.
yeah, my background really comes out of a team sport kind of mentality.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really super fortunate in one of my first roles. Spent 37 years in different roles in the relocation and real estate industry that a lady saw more in me than I saw in myself. And so I was very fortunate. She walked up to me at the office. I was in an entry level role and she said, "Hey, you have an opportunity to go somewhere in this company, but not without your degree." And she handed me the already completed application that she had sent to a school and said, "You're going back to school. You're going to get your and then you're going to use that to go far in this organization." And so I finished my undergrad as a married father of one at night while I was working a full-time job. And I thank her every day for walking up and doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And, I just progressed. And from that moment, I just continued to progress in my career through different roles, a couple of different relocations, ended up ultimately being the chief operating officer at one of major real estate brand franchise. And as you can imagine, because one of the things you asked, Amy, is about the ups and downs, right? So you spend
Yeah.
37 years in a real estate career when in kind of the later innings of that 2008 and 2009 hit,
Yeah.
that is a down.
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah.
Historic
Yes,
proportion.
right. Exactly. And not only as in my professional life, but in your personal life and everything else. And we had just moved to Charlotte and built a house 3 years prior. And yeah, if you could be in real estate for that long and still manage to buy at the ultimate high and just watch it go straight down, you start to question your decisioning, right?
Oh, man.
So, spent a bunch of time there reinventing myself. One of the things that we talk about here at BNI, my current role, is our core values. And one of the questions that we like to ask are, what are your personal core values? Because it's easy to talk about the ones that we have painted on the wall. And I reflect on that all the time. And one of my personal ones is perseverance and fortitude, right? Like you just have to keep moving.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the little changes. And it really comes from, what are my behaviors? How do I take those behaviors and apply them to my priorities? So what are my behaviors are my routines. I have to apply that to my priorities. And then you drive the relationships you have to magnify those. So I had in 2020, right before COVID, we did some reorganization at my previous company, and I had a couple paths I could have taken. I took the path of exiting the company graciously, and after a couple years of doing my own thing with a partner, got bored and started looking for a new role, and ended up here at BNI, and have
Wow.
progressively kind of moved through that. And so, as you mentioned, that's kind of my history and how I got here. So it wasn't a lot of people will look at when you get to the higher roles and say, "Wow, look at he just got that." Yeah, no,
Yeah.
you work for these things.
Absolutely. And I appreciate the realness, right? I think to your point, a lot of times I use the metaphor like when people we see athletes on the medal stand or, people, unicorns in entrepreneurship, you think that it's easy to kind of look at the sexy, like the reward in that, but all that it takes to kind of get there. Dave, you really highlighted a key component of that journey, which is the connection. I just think back the power of that woman leader who walked up to your desk and as you described it, saw something that you didn't. But to have not only that support, but also that challenge, like there was a fundamental belief and really kind of encourage you to step up and take advantage of that opportunity before you, which is so powerful. I also heard you say something about fortitude and our ability to kind of keep moving. Certainly helpful advice in many aspects, but I'm just curious for you, besides the power that comes from the connection, what fuels that fortitude? I mean, sometimes it feels like we're getting punched from every direction, right? Maybe it's at work, maybe it's in our personal life with relationships or family or friends. Certainly, you mentioned relocation. That's not without its punches in itself. But like, especially when you just kind of feel like it's a season, you're like, okay, when's enough? Like enough, right? What fuels your fortitude?
When I get asked if I'm competitive is an understatement. So losing isn't an option in my opinion. It's having those punches, as you say. You said it really, really kind of eloquently when you said it's a season, right? Looking back, when you've been in business or you're as old as I am, the mirror gets bigger because there's a lot more behind you. And for the younger leaders out there, they may feel like it's never going to end, but it does. We had a keynote speaker at our Sydney convention in November, a
Mhm.
guy by the name of Alan Stein, and he just wrote a book called Next Play. He was consulting he did a lot of work with Kobe Bryant in the team, and the concept behind it, and it's one I've applied basically my whole life without naming it that. But you miss the shot or something happens. Okay, what do I do next?
Yeah.
I get a big promotion and it's exciting. Okay, what do I do next? You have to stop and evaluate. You have to stop and celebrate, but then you got to move to the next thing. And that's
Mhm.
really where the fortitude comes in. Is I'm never satisfied. I think a great example of this is I have 4 kids, the youngest of which now is 28. And I made a promise to myself and actually challenged them that I would always know more about technology than they would. And,
Whoa.
I've pretty much been able to do that. They
Have
still
you?
come to me and ask me, "How do I get in or do this or whatever?"
That's
No,
fantastic.
I don't spend a whole lot of time doing TikTok dances, but,
Right.
um, uh, but,
Yeah.
like, I'm teaching them some of the AI components, things that are going on today. So it's just I've always just had that drive to know I can never be the best, but always trying to be.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. The drive, that's the internal motivation, the fuel, right? That helps us get there. And a big part of our work is we help people be ready for their moments that matter, right? And critical elements of that may be regulating their emotions and like how their composure, certainly have some clarity in what they're focused on. Like what's the most important thing to your point? Like, okay, now what's next? What do we need to do? And then to connect with people and then courageously take that action. I sit back and think the challenges that kind of roll along. I like how you've adapted and continue to have a game within the game. Like the challenge that you shared with your sons. I mean, that can kind of fuel that curiosity, that sense of confidence, and then also the connection that comes with that. With your leaders in your business and the work role, can you talk a bit about how, like you mentioned, kind of the next play, like how you're able to kind of show up even after maybe taking a punch here or there, and show up and be moment ready, like for that discreet, maybe it's a crucial conversation, maybe it's a presentation, but despite all the noise that we have in our arenas, what helps you show up?
First, it's not always easy
Yeah.
to learn. I continue to learn every day. And very recently, I did some self-reflection on those very moments, right? When you are faced with something and you have really two choices, react or pause and respond.
Hmm.
And I had gotten to a place where I was doing more reacting. And so I needed to really pause and reflect. But, in order to do those things, and I have leaders all over the world.
Yeah.
We have 76 countries that we have members in, and so we have cross-cultural things that I have to think about in terms of communication. We have time zones and everything else, and you asked about whether it's a critical conversation, whether that's a presentation, whether it's being on stage for a keynote, all those things, and
Hmm.
you as a prominent speaker know this. It only works when you prepare.
Right.
You have to prepare. You have to
Yeah.
sit back, and not be as reactive, and if you're prepared, even if something comes at you that you weren't expecting, you're probably more prepared generally to
Hmm.
think about that, and so I've really been working on that myself again this year and thinking about outside perception and how I can help my leaders be better.
Hmm. Hmm. That preparation, we always talk about like, do you rise to the moment? But the reality is more than likely we will fall back to the preparation that we bring into it.
Yep.
And some of these concepts, I think, I get a little frustrated, Millie, sometimes because they're nice bumper stickers, right? Like,
Yeah.
we're working the process. And then I remember like sitting in front of like 18-year-old athletes. I'm like, we're working the process. And they're like, yeah, we're working the process. I'm like, what's process?
Yeah.
What is that? Like, what are you doing to prepare for that moment? You mentioned how can you pause and then respond? Certainly in that pause, you have the opportunity to regulate that emotion. You have an opportunity to kind of refocus on what matters most in that moment and be able to respond or communicate that in a more optimized manner. But that's an example, right? Like of a very specific target of preparation. It's like you don't go into practice just to practice hockey. Like,
Right.
I'm just going to go play hockey today,
Yeah,
right?
sometimes you do, and that's just for fun, but if you're really trying to do something I
Hmm.
alluded to that thing about your behaviors and your priorities and your relations.
Yeah.
In your behaviors come your routines, and there's your prep, right? What is my routine?
Yeah.
I have a horrible routine of writing my speeches way too close to when they are due, but it's been my routine for years, and it's because when I write them earlier,
Yeah.
I think in bullet points, I think in segments, and then I can talk to it. So when I do that and I come back to it 30 days later to kind of refine it, I'm like, I don't remember what I was thinking.
Where did these bullets come from? Who
Yeah.
wrote this?
So it's a whole lot easier for me to just do it and go.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like the routine is the process which you've adopted, right? Like I heard you say you have your speaking points, and then certainly the reps that you've put in. Maybe it is those years of being on stage. Those are all reps that you have now taken additional skills from. Maybe it's improvising, maybe it's learning to just be you and talk with people by sharing those points, but not memorizing and then just reading something
Right.
that makes it so powerful.
Yeah, I had somebody tell me once I was getting ready to go on stage, and he looked at me and he just said, "Just be Dave."
Just be Dave.
I was like, "Okay, I can do that. That's easy."
Yeah. Such a helpful cue and it holds meaning to you, right? Like for you, just that's easy. It probably holds significant meaning of maybe voice, tone, cadence of speech, body posture, right? Like there's so much in that one cue. And I think that's a powerful, powerful tool to remember. Speaking of immediate and actionable tools or strategies, I'm curious, Dave, if you would like to share back any other piece of advice, something that you have found that when you have implemented it as part of your routine, perhaps in daily or it could be weekly, it has really helped you sustain this grind, right? So I talked about moments that matter. We talked about like presentation you might be giving, but this isn't just one, right?
Right.
The greats, Michael Jordan wasn't one of the best because he had one amazing game. He was able to sustain that over a significant period of time. So for you, is there something that helps ground you and sustain that high performance?
I think it goes back, at least for me, a little bit to my own personal core values, right? There's a sign behind me over there. It says fearlessly authentic. And the other sign above it says, don't call it a dream, call it a plan. And if there's one thing that I would say helped over time was just staying consistent and true. You just have to stay consistent and true. And I got to a place where because of how I grew up, because of from a family dynamics, and my parents, they didn't even graduate from high school. My dad was a very, very talented artist, so he didn't even think about those next
Wow.
things. He was just a talented artist, and so I had to kind of figure it out on my own.
Yeah.
And it was a lot of learning and a lot of
Mhm.
mistakes, and you just have to be okay with that and not do it again or figure out. But I spent a lot of time after that lady did that for me, going after what I decided what I wanted, and then I put steps in place to go after what I wanted. I didn't sit back and wait
Mhm.
for, "I hope somebody recognizes me." That had my one shot at that, and that was her.
Yeah.
And, from there, I took it and said, I'd like to do this." So I took it upon myself to go learn that and figure it out and go do it. And if I didn't get it, I figured out a different way to get it by working harder doing something else. And so it's just that
Mhm.
consistency. And it's cliche to an extent of putting up your dream board or here's what I want and writing down your goals. But those are things that work,
Yeah.
right? Write it
Yeah.
down.
Write
I've
it
told my
down.
kids, what do you want to do? Write it down. Because when you write it down, it's committed.
Wow, super helpful reminder. I think many of us can kind of get caught up in our head in that fantasizing, dreaming state. And to your point, even the action of writing it down is action, right? The key here is we have to take action for any of these things to achieve any of that which we're desiring. Maybe it's something that's more fulfilling in your life. Maybe it's a specific role at work, but the action is really what's going to bring that, not just
Yeah.
thinking and dreaming. So
Yeah.
so helpful. Dave, pleasure to have this conversation. A helpful reminder of not just those key foundations that can help us sustain that high performance, but certainly help us all show up in our moment that matters. So pause and respond. Love it. Challenge yourself with that learning and certainly very much appreciate. Let's take action towards our dreams. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure. It was great being here and appreciate you having me on.
Awesome.